Everyone. I'm sorry for the delay. Technology is very interesting. I work with computers, so people assume that I'm good with these things, but I view it more as like these are my dragons that I battle every day, and occasionally I win. I think we can call today a draw. The topic, or the title for my talk today is to make every game your last, but in a good way. So, without further ado, if you could only make one more game ever, what game would that be? What would you put into it, and what would you want to say with it? And what do you want to accomplish with it? To me, Unravel was very much that game. It was my last game, my ultimate game. And this talk is about that process, the process of making that game, the inspiration behind it, and the goals I had for it, and the thoughts that went into it, and all the hope that led up to it. I call Unravel my last game, but it was actually not my first last game. I've made many last games. I've been working in the video game industry for about 11 years now. I started at Coldwood. Interestingly enough, actually, I've been working at the same company the whole time, and with roughly the same people the whole time. I started at Coldwood just after my son was born, so I think it's pretty easy for me to keep track of it. And it's also pretty scary when I see how big he's grown, that I know that's the amount of time I also spent at Coldwood. And we've made a ton of games during that time, and we've had a lot of fun. But I would say that most of the games we made were wholly unremarkable things. We made sports games, we made skiing games, we made sled racing games, and they were essentially kind of, I don't know, pointless, I guess. They weren't really about anything at all. And eventually I got really fed up with that. And I started thinking about last games. And I think there's pretty much two ways to look at making last games. It's the whole thing where people say, like, you should live like tomorrow's your last day. I think most people would just like break down and cry and say, oh no, I'm gonna die. But you can do it differently. I mean, you can whine about it, or you can be very positive about it. You can do exits, right and wrong. Another thing that I did during these 11 years that I've been working is I have crunched a lot, like far, far, far too much. We were a really small company of just like between 10 and 15 people, and we were working with bigger publishers, and we were kind of, I don't know, bullied for most of 10 years, I guess. So it's working 60, 80-hour work weeks was kind of like the norm for us. It wasn't like we had a crunch period. We had periods of non-crunch. And it was crazy. I mean, making games is an awesome thing to do, but crunch will destroy anything. It's really, we had absurd hours and totally unreasonable terms. And even at the planning stage, you knew that when you looked at a project like this, there's no way this is ever going to be done with normal work hours. There's just no way. But also, we figured that we didn't have that many options. You could only work with a publisher then. That was sort of the only venue that we had, because it was before Steam, it was before like Live Arcade and everything like that. So it's just like, it was the only way we could do it. And it was a completely uneven playfield. And I got really, really fed up with that too. And then we made a hit. It wasn't Unravel, so don't worry. But it was like probably like the worst time of my life. We made a fighting game together with Sony. It was supposed to be like our finest hour when we finally made something that made some kind of splash, something that people would notice. It started out as my idea, a little physics-based toy, but then along the way of the project, it got really derailed. It totally turned sour. I called it my pyramid at first because I was sort of in that period in life, like when dudes get around 30, they want to leave like a mark on the world. I was like desperate to make this monument. I want to make this pyramid, something that people will know and remember forever. But then the meaning of the word changed throughout the project, so the pyramid became synonymous with just like dragging big, heavy stones through the desert while someone is cracking a whip across your back, and it kind of sucked. And it was, like I said, it was a completely derailed project. I remember at one point where I had a meeting with a producer and said, like, you took my lean shark, my super fast, agile little beast, and you turned it into a whale that's riding a tricycle with a camper van duct taped to its back while playing a violin. And it's just like, it's a monster now. And it was a complete critical disaster. I'm not even sure we're on Metacritic. I think they just like, let's just, we cap, we have a floor somewhere, and everything below that we don't care about. But it was also a very big commercial success because people had fun with it. And it reached a lot of people. It reached a really big audience. And that was actually what made it the worst thing for me. Because, I mean, this is just to give you some perspective. This isn't even half the people who played the game. It was hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people, and it was massive. And just swap the context out for a moment. Imagine speaking to that many people. You have their undivided attention for like 6, 8, 10 hours, and then you have absolutely nothing to say. Like, how many chances in life do you get at doing something like that? Like, how many chances like that does anyone get? I mean, the Pope, maybe? I don't know. Obama. So it feels irresponsible to just walk up there and it's like, hey, I was going to kill a bit of your time. That's not what you do when you have an audience like that listening. And I was just destroyed by that. So at that point, I was completely overworked. I was creatively frustrated, and I was angry with just about everything, and I totally wanted out. Like, that was when I started making my last games. The fighting game was to be my last game, and the game after that was to be my last game, and I was just done. But then Triumph happened, but it was disguised as a disaster because we had a project canceled and everybody in the studio got fired, which was surprisingly a very good thing. It was actually liberating, totally liberating. Because when something like that happens, it forces you to think. I think I'd spent a lot of time before then just worrying, like really, really worrying, because you always have this notion when you're making games that it's slightly too good to be true. And you kind of worry that at some point someone's going to wake you up and say, like, this is over now, you can't do it anymore. Even though you're working really hard, you know that it's a cool thing, and you worry about losing it. But it was kind of like, you know, you spend your entire life like balancing on the edge of a cliff, and then someone just pushes you right off, but then you realize that you can fly. That's how I felt at the time. Because I just sat down and thought about, what do I think is really important? What do I really want to do? And actually, I went camping with my family. We had some vacation left that we could take out, and it was basically the last chance to do that. And then it was, we wouldn't have a job to come back to. We were closing down, and everybody was, you know, I mean, the video game industry is kind of shaky. It has ups and downs, and everybody goes through rough patches. But this was basically like we were done at the time. So I went camping with my family, and I realized that I have one more game in me. Actually, I'm angry with so many things. I have so much that I want to say, so that I'm going to make a proper last game. I'm going to make a proposal for a game that's a statement, that's a proper, real exit. And I mean, it sounds silly to say, but it's like the stars aligned. And I was out in the woods with my family and just in a place that I love, surrounded by people that I love, and I was doing the thing that I love. And it was just one of those days where everything just goes right. I've used the analogy before, like, I don't know if you've read Harry Potter, but when he drinks the liquid luck potion, it feels like that, except that it's not luck. It's just like things feel right, and you just follow your heart, and then the pieces kept falling into place. And yeah, I mean, I wish everybody gets to have a day like that, because it was a very, very surreal and beautiful thing. It was like when I needed something, it just happened to be there. I figured, like, I was talking on the phone with a coworker who was asking me to do a presentation for this, and I said to him, like, I don't have anything with me, and so if you want a presentation, it'll have to be like made out of sticks and stones. And then as I said that, it's like, of course it should be made out of sticks and stones. That's like the perfect thing for this game. And I wanted to build this little character so I could try to act out gameplay, and I figured I would need some wire. And then I found this old anchor cable, like a rusty anchor cable to a boat, and peeled some wire off of that and built a little skeleton of it. And I borrowed the red yarn from this, it was like this punk rock kid who was camping out in a tent nearby, and he was knitting a sweater, and I was like, you couldn't make this stuff up. It's very, very strange how everything just fell into place. It's like so inspired. It was meant as a statement, and it was meant as an exit. It was meant to be like my big goodbye note and middle finger to the game industry. But from that first moment of inspiration, I really loved this. I loved this project because it was everything that I'd been missing. I was trying to get everything right this one last time, and when things started turning out right, it was glorious. Like, we were working on something that was personal, and something that was meaningful and beautiful, and something that was about love and empathy. And that really caught on, and we got unfired. All of us got right back to work, and everybody was like super fired up about it. We had the creative joy again. We had fun at work. I mean, everything didn't turn out perfect, but it was just like, it was the best thing we'd done. I guess we failed miserably at that last game bit, but that's okay, because it was fun to make games again. Unravel was the sum of many lessons learned. It was, I think making games is like, it's a journey. It's always a journey. You always learn new things. You never know quite where you're going to end up. And there are surprises and treasures and pitfalls at every turn along the way. I had this slight sense that when I was going into this, I was really, like I said, I was angry with everything, and I was just like, this time we're going to do it right. So I felt like I knew what I was doing, but and it wasn't just luck, but a lot of it was luck, and a lot of it just, you learned it along the way. And I felt far wiser coming out the other end of this project. And what I realized was that I really, really like this whole last game concept. Like, you shouldn't, I mean, it's harsh to say you shouldn't, but there are a lot of games that are essentially just throwaway games. Nobody needs them. You should make every game like it really, really matters. And I think I've learned a little bit about how to do that. And I think the first and most important thing is that you should make your last game for the people that you really love. When I was talking about the pyramid before, when I was making my mark on the world, I was working an unhealthy amount of hours at the time. And I guess I was being kind of like a terrible family person at the time. Like, you spend this much time and effort to try to win the love and adoration of complete strangers. No offense, but still, complete strangers. So that you get to the point where you're actually kind of hurting the people that really love you, the ones who are closest to you. And when I was working on this project, I just realized that this is something that I will never, ever, ever do again, because these are the people that matter the most for me. So I wanted to make something that they would love and something that they would be proud of, and something that I could make on reasonable terms, so that, you know, you don't throw your own life away because you're pouring everything into this game that you're making. So it was kind of my way to, you know, say I love them and make this cool thing for them. So it's for them first, and then for me, and then for everybody else. So it's personal and universal, but personal first. And you should definitely make your last game together with people that you love. Like I said, I've worked 11 years at the same company and 11 years with a lot of the same people. And of course, there's ups and downs during those years. But I mean, you have to love each other. And I don't think a last game is something that you should ever try to make alone. And a game like Unravel is definitely, I mean, that would definitely have been impossible to make alone, because it's far too complex. And also, it just wouldn't be fun. It's an experience that's meant to be shared. I think making games is as much fun as playing games. I mean, it's a game in itself, and it's just a very, very beautiful game. So what started out as an exit, what started out as my goodbye note, it ended up as kind of a love letter, actually. Like, I wanted to do something, I wanted to like celebrate all these awesome moments that we had together, and I want to make sure that we like had fun again. And last games should definitely be about things that you love, or things that you care deeply about, things that mean something to you. And you shouldn't be afraid to share. Like, you should definitely do your own thing. Don't try to fulfill someone else's fantasy. So use what matters most to you. Use your best stuff and say what you have to say. But you should also try to invite people in and let them make it theirs as well. So it should be personal, but it should be able to be personal to everyone. And for me, nature was a really big deal, since since the concept was essentially created when I was out in the woods. And like all the first little images that I took of Yarny climbing on trees and dragging rocks around, like nature was such a big part of that I felt like obviously nature has to be a big part of the game. And I just felt like sharing a slice of home. I wanted to invite people to like all the places that I love and show them all my best stuff. But I wanted it to feel like their home as well, so that they could feel welcome there, so that they could make it theirs. I'll just have to say that I have no idea how long I've been talking, because all the technology is super broken right now. So if you think I'm going on too long, you just have to like make a droning noise. Game development usually means making lots of compromises, for good and for bad. And I've definitely fallen into that trap before, like the fighting game that totally blew up and exploded. That's why I chose this image, because that's how it felt to make that game. You just have these annoying things that are just buzzing around your head and constantly sucking your blood. But what happened with that game was that we completely lost the heart and soul of it. And game has to know what its heart and soul is, especially a last game. A last game has to have a lot of heart, and you should never, ever compromise with that. And when you're making your last game, you're kind of free to be a dog with a bone. Like, if someone gets close to your thing, you can just growl, because you know, like, this is my last game and nobody's going to mess with it. And I think compromise is good, but never compromise with the wrong things. And you should definitely make your last game fun to work on. I touched on this briefly before, but game making is an awesome thing, and I am lucky to be doing this, but it's still a job, and it's very easy for it to become a grind if you are not wary, if you're not careful. So you should always try to make sure that it stays awesome. It's not awesome by nature, because there are still lots of people out there that would try to exploit you and your efforts and your passion. And don't take any crap. Like, do cool things. Surprise yourselves. Like, one of the best things that we did on this project was when we went out on this reference photo shoots. Like, we just packed a bunch of people in a car and went out and was crawling around in the underbrush with cameras and taking pictures of mushrooms and lingonberries, and just it was so much fun, and it just sparked everyone's creativity. It was a very glorious thing. Without passion, Unravel would never have happened. And you should definitely make your last game with passion and with love. There were so many stumbling blocks along the way when we were making Unravel. Like, there were so many ways it could have gone wrong, so many ways it just could have ended, but love carried it through. And what was really beautiful about it was that everybody that we met along the way, like all the people that we worked with, were really, that passion is really infectious. It rubs off on people. So people could tell that we were super passionate about this, and they got really excited with that, and just went with it, went along with it. And that was beautiful. But if passion plus intelligence equals love, then passion without intelligence is just stupid. So be smart. Like, passion doesn't mean self-destruction. Just because you're passionate about something does not mean that you should crunch your life away, because it's your last game. You don't have time to be dumb. You don't have time for bad behavior. And you should always, always refuse to be one of those useful idiots, one of those people who allow themselves to be exploited. And I think that, I mean, it's sad to say, but the truth is that the industry has, and to some extent still is, built on the efforts of those people, like these passionate idiots who burn out in 3 years and end up hating the thing that they loved. And I think it's very good to see that we're kind of trying to move away from that, but that process is still happening. I think your last game should be your last game, not because you burn out trying to make it. It should be your last game because you said what you wanted to say, you did what you wanted to do, and you dropped the mic and left. That's a good last game. So pour your heart into it, but don't ever take any crap from anyone. And just as a side note, I think this is interesting because Unravel is such a nice game. It's a very friendly and lovely game. But it was also, the whole process was actually sparked by anger. I was trying to right a lot of wrongs. I was upset with a lot of things about our process and about games in general. And I was mad about stuff when I wrote this. So don't ever underestimate anger as a creative driving force. Handle it, deal with it, and use it. Like, don't go around yelling at each other at work, but still, like, anger can be a very positive thing if you use it right. And there are definitely many reasons to be mad in this day and age, so please make something constructive out of that. Which kind of leads me into this, that make sure that your last game has something meaningful to say. Give your game a purpose. Have an agenda. Like, don't be shy about having an agenda. Unravel had a really simple one. It started out as kind of like a joke, but it was a serious joke as well. I said that I would be happy if the game made people call their mom, which they did. It was kind of like this, we had this idea that we wanted people to fall in love so we could break their hearts and then put them back together again, because it feels very nice to be comforted. And that's the feeling we wanted to inspire. We wanted to inspire empathy. We took it so far that we made empathy and caring into like actual game mechanics. We try to be subtle about it because we wanted players to come to the story rather than to push all that stuff on them, so that you could kind of make the game into what you wanted. But if you got into it, then you got to see this person who was longing, who was lonely and aching, and you could feel their pain and their loss. So it wasn't like this super big, extravagant doomsday scheme, but it was just like a lonely old person that was aching for company. And she could have been like any one of us. And her loss could easily be our loss. So you could feel empathy. It was not just some unrelatable, like really distant fantasy. It was just like a very real, common, everyday thing that, someone is sad and you solve it by being nice to them. So empathy was a big thing, and we try to enforce it through the character as well. It's an unusual character in that sense because it's not a traditional hero character. It's a rather weak character. You are this fragile hero that has like a big heart, but not that much actual power. So people wanted to just help and protect that character instead. So you have all these good intentions, and you know that you have a huge quest in front of you, and that little character will need help to pull it all off. And I think games are actually brilliant at inspiring empathy because they let you walk in someone's shoes. They let you share an experience and really live a story. You're not just watching, you're in there. And we used so many different tools to immerse people in this experience. Like we had all the sound and the scenery and the beautiful music, and we had layers and layers of animation on the character to make it seem real, to make it seem alive, always aware of its surroundings, that you would never think of it as just like a bunch of pixels on screen, but it was like a real living thing that you could relate to. So when you see Yarny like all huddled up in the rain and the cold, you feel the same thing as well. And that's pretty cool. I mean, there's a film festival here now, so I guess a lot of you people might be film people as well. And I think as a film director, you would kind of envy having that degree of control over someone's emotion. Because once we have established that empathy, once players feel for the character, essentially what the characters feel is what the players feel. So we can create, through gameplay, we can totally direct players' mood. And that's pretty cool. And you can use that to create these, like, to create very symbolic gameplay. You can tell stories through gameplay. Like we have this scene late in the game where you're dragging this light through a blizzard, and it's cold and it's dark, and that's your single safe spot, and everything around you is just chaos and turmoil, and that thing is just so heavy to drag along, but you know that at some point you will eventually be forced to let it go because it's just too heavy to drag along, and it's going to drag you under. And it's a very powerful moment. And it's all without saying a single word. It's all through gameplay. And that's pretty cool. And we definitely weren't trying to just be mean. I think being mean is pretty easy. Creating a situation like that when people feel bad is a smaller challenge than to give them real, actual joy. So what we tried to do was use the mean bits as contrast. We try to make the game dark enough to make you love the light. I think we have some pacing problems with it because we did lose some people along the way. But for those people who made it all the way to the end and got the big turnaround, it was profound. Like, we've had so much feedback from people who said that they've never, ever played anything like it. They never had a moment like that when everything just feels good. And I think that's kind of, even if it's a simple goal, I think it's a pretty noble goal to just try to make people happy. It didn't work on everyone, but for those people where it did work, it was beautiful. And it's been kind of very emotional to read all the feedback from people who just gotten in touch with us and just said that this is not like anything they played. Games are very powerful things. But I think that we could do even better. This was just our first stumbling attempt at it. As powerful as I think that games are, I mean, I think we're just scratching the surface of what they can be and what they can mean. One thing that I find very interesting is, I don't know if you know about lucid dreaming, when you're able to control the content of your dreams. And research finds that people who play games are much more likely to have lucid dreams. And I guess this is because you expect to be able to solve any problem. You expect every problem to have a solution. I have these dreams a lot. I have these crazy chase dreams that would be the most horrible nightmares if I didn't win every single time. I always get away. And the more trouble I'm in, the better it feels when I overcome it. And it's quite cool. So if games can change how people dream, maybe they can change how people live, too. I mean, it's not that far-fetched. The dream thing is real measurable change, and it's just one way that games could be useful. We can teach people, we can inspire people, and we can soothe them and help them cope with things, or we could agitate them or raise their awareness about things. And as we did, we can build empathy. And I think that's a really important thing. And I'm sorry if this comes off as a little bit arrogant, but I hate games that just kill time. I think time is a very precious thing. We don't have that much of it. And if people give me the gift of their time, I want to give them something useful in return. There are so many games that are just distractions. And honestly, I don't think we need much more of them. I think that mechanically perfect games, like these addictive, the time wasters, I think it's a solved problem. Like, people want to be distracted. It's not hard. It's kicking in an open door. That's not an interesting challenge for me. And I totally get that people want escapism. I do too sometimes. But if that's all we ever get, that's a wasted opportunity. And also, if we all want to escape that badly, maybe we should kind of start looking at why we all want to run instead of just still providing the drug, no questions asked. So don't settle for killing time. I mean, when we make games, we have a voice. We have a lot of people listening to us. And I think we should use that voice. So Unravel was my last game. It was my goodbye note that became a love letter. And also a manifesto, I guess, because all of these things all of these wrongs that I wanted to right. And as I was making this last game, I realized that, I want to make many more last games like this one. And I really recommend that people try, because it's pretty fun. So that's my talk. Thank you very much.